I've got the Spyderco Always Ready knife here. This came in the mail today. I purchased it at bladecity.com. I was shopping around for neck knives and I wanted something that was lightweight, thin enough to be carried, either concealed or in a front pocket, or just like in a pack or something. I wanted it to be small enough to fit in a pocket and lightweight enough that I felt like I didn't mind having it on my person if I had to be carrying it with me or around my neck. I don't usually use neck knives. I certainly don't wear them around my neck, but this one was small enough that I felt like I could get it in my pocket. Just for illustration, here's a regular pill bottle. So it's about, I'd say, less than 6 inches in length, certainly. You can look up the specs, but I think the whole thing together is less than 2 ounces, the knife and the sheath put together, even with this crappy little beaded chain. I took that off because I absolutely hate the noise that it makes, but it's also just, it's not the best material to work with. So keep it on there, take it off, it's up to you. Everything is preference when it comes to knives. I'll be the first to tell you that my preference is my own, and I'll do my best to explain or articulate why I prefer what I prefer, but everything is subjective, and you'll of course come to your own conclusions and have your own opinions. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, but know that I care about what I'm telling you, and I wouldn't steer you wrong. So first things first, the blade itself. This entire knife is, like I said, less than 6 inches. I think it's actually closer to 5. Weighs less than 2 ounces, and it is extremely thin. There's the blade profile, there's the blade stock. I'm going to try and get this as close to non-blurry as I can, but anyway. So the first thing I notice is the finger choil. It's plenty deep, plenty wide. Even the fat, nasty sausage finger can fit in there and get a good grip. The handle, this is really, it's got enough for 1 finger here and 2 more here. In my hand, I cannot get my pinky around any of it, but I can sort of squish it right up against the back here. If I needed to really, bear down on it, or if I was slicing into something or whatever, there's plenty of blade to get your other fingers on and get a good grip. If I lock down on this knife with my thumb on top, or with it on this sort of thumb ramp area back here behind this Spyderco hole, there's nowhere for it to go. There's plenty of grip, even though it's a thin blade, thin handle. It's not going anywhere once you've got it in there. So I like the finger choil, I like the thumb ramp. There's no jimping on the blade. In my opinion, you don't need it. The blade is thin, and I like the high grind, this high hollow grind. A lot of belly to the knife, and I like this sort of buoy kind of clip point that they've got going on. Plenty of sharp point if you need to puncture, and of course there's, I'm trying to get a good look at that mirror edge, but there's a great edge on it. I mean, out of the box it is extremely sharp, and I'm not going to cut anything with it to show you. You can just take my word for it. It comes sharp. The H1 steel, I've got probably 10 Spyderco knives in H1 steel. I love that it doesn't rust. It is made of, I guess it's nitrogen instead of the carbon, that it's similarly stable molecularly to carbon, but it does not rust or corrode like carbon does. As far as I'm concerned, that's worth a lot of money, because so many of my knives have gotten rusty or patinaed, and it's not because I didn't take care of, well, okay, it is because I didn't take care of them, but it's because I didn't know any better at the time, or I was younger and these are my older knives. Maybe it's just because, it's a Gerber knife and the steel isn't great, and so regardless of how well you treat it, it ends up getting some wear and tear, some rust or whatever. You could drop this in a swamp and pull it out 30 years later and it would basically look like this. I also appreciate that the H1 steel It's all H1 steel. There's nothing else. So you don't have, like, with the Vitoku SUS 410 or whatever, the Vitoku 2 SUS 410, those layers of the SUS 410 sandwich the Vitoku, but once you've sharpened it, the blade is actually going to corrode. That other steel, once it shows, it can oxidize, it'll patina, and so it gets some, some of that sort of used oxidized look finish to it. But I don't mind that. It's just that if I could have all my knives in H1 steel and know that they would never rust, that's what I would want. I spend enough time around the water or on the river or working in the rain to appreciate a knife that isn't ever, ever, ever going to rust. So H1 steel in and of itself is worth most purchases. But this little knife, I would say, holds its own. Even if it wasn't H1 steel, I'd still be interested in it just because it's got a great blade shape, great design, and it's super lightweight. So I'm going to show you this sort of safety feature that this is the second iteration, or I guess version of this knife. The original Always Ready knife did not have this little plunge tab that keeps the knife locked into the sheath. I'm telling you right now, you can see I'm not holding on to the blade, but even I cannot get this knife to sling out of the sheath. It's totally secure. Even if it was attached to my neck and I tried my hardest to pull it out, it's not going to come undone. So what you have to do, and of course you'll see that that little plunger sits right in the beginning of that finger choil. So with my hand on the handle, and if I'm carrying it on my neck, all I have to do is depress this plunger, this little tab, away from the sheath. I'm pushing down and away. You can see it kind of bending out there. And that allows the blade to come sliding out. And after the blade is on its way out, once you've depressed this little plunger, your finger pretty much wants to slide into that little choil. And I would say be careful not to cut yourself while pulling the blade out, because it does, as soon as that little tab is depressed, it can slide out. And it's a natural motion with your right hand. I would say that it's unnatural with your left hand. I would either have to pull up with my index finger and then slide it out, but at that point I risk cutting myself on the blade as it comes out. So I would suggest, or at least attempt, if I were a lefty, to get used to deploying this knife with my right hand if I had to, and then if I had the chance, you could switch to your left hand if you needed to or whatever. But really, this is designed with a right hand deployment in mind, and I'm not really sure, without making this ambidextrous and putting one on the other side that works at the same time as the other one does, I don't know how you could make this perhaps more marketable to left-handed knife users, but that is something worth considering if you're worried about the speed of your deployment or keeping it around your neck. It is designed for a right-hand index finger to press down on that safety and then pull out. So it's intuitive with the right hand. Your finger goes right in there to the choil, and of course there's enough to grip with your middle and third fingers there. But my pinky, even though it's hanging off, I can kind of squish it into the back, and if I grip down or if I lock into it, really, I mean, my index finger and my thumb are doing most of the locking, and these two fingers, my second and third fingers, are really just there to kind of back me up. But if I had to, I could hold it like this, or I could maybe push my thumb farther up. You can, of course, get a nice grip like this if you're cutting into a package or a box, slicing meat or something. You've got enough of a cutting area on this blade to be able to chop, slice, fillet if you had to. There's a lot of different utilitarian uses for a blade shape like this and for a package this small. But more than anything, and I think the guy who designed this, I believe his name was John Shirley, and John, I apologize, I can't remember your buddy's name who helped you design the knife, but I remember hearing and reading that this guy was sort of interested in a knife that could be carried at all times by personnel and I guess, folks that perhaps aren't living or working within the comfort of their home country or even a safer environment than perhaps, the showers or something like that. But more or less, this knife was designed to be carried at all times, always ready. So it can be a neck knife, it's small enough to fit in your front pocket. It could be kept in a dress shirt pocket or in a jacket pocket. There's no end to the ways that this could be mindfully concealed and carried. The only detractor, I would say, would be this safety tab. I'm glad that it's there. I was kind of worried that I wouldn't appreciate it after having seen the original model, which doesn't have it. It just has this symmetrical sheath. But I think the increased retention, obviously worth it when it comes to that. And of course, if you're a lefty and you've got to deploy using your right hand, maybe that's a skill that you have to acquire. I don't know. I'm a right-handed person, but I could certainly understand if a left-handed person was frustrated by that. The only other way I could see doing it is somehow making this double-sided, but again, I don't know that that's a practical fix either. The folks at Spyderco design excellent knives, everybody knows that, but even if that's the one thing that you're worried about or that's keeping you from maybe wanting to try it, I think it's light enough and intuitive enough, even with just the right hand, that if it were the other way around, if it were only left-hand deploy, I'd still be interested in it as a right-handed knife user because of the other qualities of this knife. So, omnidirectional texturing on the Spyderco FRN handle, which of course is molded to the sheath, I'm sorry, to the tang of the blade. Overall, it's very impressive. The form, the fit and finish, the functionality of the knife. I'm not going to cut anything because you can cut it yourself and figure out that it comes sharp. Obviously, take my word for it. But this is a knife that you're certainly going to get your money's worth out of it. The H1 steel is going to pay for itself after more than a couple months of use and moisture and whatever. But for $73.50, I believe that's the suggested MSRP by Spyderco. I think I picked mine up for a little less than $60 after I used a coupon code. But you can find this, shop around. There's a bunch of different folks that carry it because it is the second version of this knife to come out, and I think they've fixed the problems with the sheath, of course. So I'd highly recommend. I'm going to carry it and probably attempt to wear it as a neck knife. I typically don't, just because I don't enjoy wearing a neck knife, but this one is small enough and flat enough that I don't really think I'm going to notice it being there. And of course, I'm not a small person by any means, but if this were on my neck or in my pocket, it's lightweight enough and secure enough that I don't have to worry about it being there or flopping around or being a part of my daily activities. And of course, if I ever needed it, it's right there and it's only a second away. So can't say enough about how impressed I am with this knife, and I'm looking forward to getting some more use out of it because I think it's only going to prove itself when it comes to using it. So Spyderco Always Ready knife. I believe it only comes in this black color, black handle, but for a neck knife and for what you're getting, the small package, the thoughtful design, the excellent materials used in the product, I don't think you'll be upset or sorry that you purchased this knife and made it part of your collection. So without further ado, Spyderco Always Ready knife. I would definitely suggest picking one up if you enjoy using neck knives, or if you've never had a neck knife and have any interest in trying one that might convert you. Anyway, thanks very much and enjoy your knives.